countries, their house institutions have made for responsible because our customers are very follow the probably one of these for questions with new corpus to say as control of the present copies that new ones that increase in older new ladders on new conferences to upgrades key data so it solves trafficking via location tracing epic 20 countries over universities able to report to the SS I allow able to address as new versus laboratories for some their report to the other authorities I use study as quick as they are some focus on address of the doors and able to shape for the robots and new conferences our to be rain a mystery concession 2 is verification of the global arms control regime is on the brink of collapse the plans for revitalization and regulation of next gen text miss 21. Have you ever concluded important news as a specific version of modern sessions with this or Sophie, the big artificial of non-proliferation arms rolls and impact filters, crystal size, cyber computer autonomous weapons, hybrid substance explosive around the problems it's on the technology options, exposition comes substance, visibility of autonomy, offices has to reflect also with actually learning, we immerse US out Russia, social holding, or demanding standard nuclear forces and US capabilities are both key goals for scenario forces or market rise use of HU, checking content, nuclear forces, robust capability, international of shipments of US launch able to partners 85 countries nuclear service and forces applicable role reference the nuclear forces beyond the insurance customers just are awarding emphasize for city unregulated autonomous weapons are essential just enforcing their hypothetical disease even though there's no all basically the weaponized the nuclear chain reaction company by South members possible here the battle of verification dreams and nuclear archaeology ensures international confidence was a prerequisite to disarm many places 15 most nuclear forces and verification system or was at least on edge planet a nuclear weapons and international nuclear service such a verification confidence in the company high level this will ensure secret time basis and the executive nuclear verify this very companies that could be efficiency nuclear or this is definitely companies became the nuclear analysis and assess something to resolve nuclear missiles nuclear one regulation nuclear forces suffer nuclear forces region nuclear analysis could fairly excluded existence on nuclear vitality nuclear archaeological analysis nuclear forces seem to take not directly about physical stockpiles themselves with device a serious have confidence nuclear methodology ability to reference data for evaluation. The Russia war is the largest impact tried for arms control. Wolf Saw 18. Arms control for Russia, America, both successful arms control treaty solves war, current modernization trends, ensure no first strike, warden, war goes nuclear extinction, the US and the lost sort of hard battle in Australia, wars in history, black smoke would black cold, depending I go will why worse for famine, everyone on the planet would die. Independently planned South Korean news loose that loose news escalates out scenario social ships have told us saying or Pakistan and to ensure finally see nuclear forensics British gas and facilities and to ensure that actual security government seats to arms control forcing nuclear forensics from the forces I can fashion level seats credible 100% ensures responses I can ensure national release and nuclear material dissuaded from diversity. Nuclear forensics is a process, not an event. Epic 2011 mentions that DC process information national nuclear forensics nuclear forensics following analysis of the approaches. Effective leadership is the bedrock of both advantages. Personnel, on global required by Congress no less than 100 That's the plan. The United States federal government should access national criminal justice firm in the United States nuclear forensics that has already been sent out. No more requests now. Forensics is key to CCPC and CC verification, including verification and verification of nuclear arms, nuclear forensics, nuclear forensics, on the future, central nuclear system, tree verification of the CCPC, on the SOT, efficiency, the use of device on the evidence of actually weapons, violation, FCT, post verification, nuclear system, how would it result in the system, the sort of the efficiency of the emphasis age, they can be determined nuclear forensics, first analysis, the person, the identity, master strategy, the chief on measurable was many on the essays on the operation, the method of the contribution of differences and FCT verification only increase represent solves norm proliferation only in Campbell 11 use of the verification immediately Apple Street international community officially some resistance doubling out positive of nuclear episode with the no design of operating as for the percent another new episode than horror has started 19 Pakistan no you can go here creative investment in nuclear nuclear test of the explosions of the nuclear society no comes with both words on the refugee is on the oppression of the nuclear communication or protecting the international community and the design of the deter nuclear testing strong expressions of the understanding of the 3D would give it's the ability to control conduct short notice. Martha card is short notice. Those 2 cards are going to be sent right now.
Yeah, send us these.
All right, plan and those 2 cards have been sent. I'm good for cross-X.
I haven't received either yet, so I'm going to wait for that if that's all right.
Yep, no worries. It's in one email.
Okay, great. Who does the plan?
United States federal government.
I need to be more specific for the sake of JSATs. Who does the plan?
Well,
what?
We think that the most efficacious version of the plan might be Congress, but agent counter plans don't compete. The Carnesale evidence specifies what?
Do politics DSATs not compete?
The DA is not. What do you mean?
Like you've said, like for the purpose of counter plans, like.
Okay, we are not specifying the agent of the plan, to be very clear, but we think like we're not going to be like no link. The plan is courts to the politics DA.
Great,
right?
that's fine.
The normative.
That's fine. That's fine. I would like to move on. I'd like to move on. Yeah, thanks. That's fine. Okay, what is the scenario for NPT rejoining? Why do other nations follow on, and how does that relate to North Korea?
The second advantage is dependent on Congress creating the signal via the creation of a verification regime in the United States that other states would be able to follow on and ratify the NPT.
Why would North Korea do that?
Well, it's not necessarily that like North Korea has to follow the NPT. We'll make that claim, sure, but we don't need that for solvency. A couple of things. Number one is strengthening the NPT writ large means that we can pressure North Korea into not becoming sort of nukes are us, as the Allison evidence described.
Okay, that's fine.
Second is obviously if every single or one of 85 countries joined the nuclear arms or NPT and they're all pushing North Korea to denuclearize,
okay, sure,
it would kind of feel pressure to join.
Yeah, sure. The arms control impact filter. So why does it curtail things like cyber conflict or hypersonics?
Well, it's just that the NPT as a whole can do that, and states would be able to feel more political and audience costs if they see that the international community as a whole is not in favor of that type of proliferation. Okay.
The AF, I assume, operates under the forensics part of the topic.
I mean, sure. That might be an interpretation of the plan.
Okay.
So, do you want me to explain what the plan does? Sure. The Carnesale evidence basically says that we do a couple of things. The most important part for affirmative solvency is that we strengthen the sort of like funding and regulatory regimes that are behind nuclear forensic science. This is key to what the Glaser evidence describes as nuclear archaeology. And that's basically a process by which we can stop states from hiding nuclear arsenals. The mechanism is basically like, if a state were to say that they don't have nuclear arsenals, right, they have not produced anymore, we can actually match the production camp material with the other material that we see in stockpiles themselves, right?
Got it.
So if they produce more,
sure. I'd like to move on. The nuclear forensics arguments, how do criminal nuclear forensics relate to broader like treaty obligations? What evidence do you have that indicates that?
What do you mean?
What about criminal justice reform carries nuclear forensics?
Well, nuclear forensics is in criminal justice reform. We'll have a bunch of
Why?
cards for that. But more broadly, we've read cards about nuclear forensic science being the baseline of congressional involvement in the NPT.
Okay, I need a moment to mute myself, and then we're going to start prep at 10.
Cool, no worries.
You stop at 903.
Sending out now. In the meantime, it's 7, advantage 1, advantage 2.
David's going to quickly run to the bathroom while you're sending.
Cool. It's actually 8. That's my bad.
What did you say the case order was?
Just advantage 1, advantage 2. All right, I'll send out now. When everyone's good, can you just give me a thumbs up?
Wait, could you put your prep in the chat, by the way, just so that we can keep it there?
For sure.
This might says TOC round 6. Seems to be a different F.
I don't think so. It looks like I sent.
I also
Oh,
got
it
TOC.
does.
Yep.
You can enjoy that if you end up hitting. You know, I don't even remember. TOC's crazy, man. It's sent. Just give me a thumbs up. You're good.
Yeah, we have still not gotten it, so just give us a sec.
Yep, no worries.
All right, now we're good.
Tyler, all good? Cool.
First of the UK, irrational calculator around the hypermasculine construction of state action, but war making claims about to patently flight general fly that show 13 hours of political by the irrational calculation of objective by masculine and sexually produced and batteries every competition and domination of parts of war and competition and creation of life or war and peace with self-produced dissipated violence. The alternative is to reject the after paper analogical version of the deconstruction of the masculine western subject. The young form makes it methods of the super original family and the ontological recognition and necessary go by an appearance and examine a different gender powers under relation from their literal subject the literary details and masculinity something to have originated when they produced it seems likely critically adjusting parts of the manhead help that as beyond the appearance of masculinity accepted naturalness. The counterplan. The United States Congress has delegated the authority of the Nuclear Forensic Department of Justice. The agency has delegated administrative rulemaking and regulating under forensic under litigation. The federal judiciary has to only review the case under applicability, non-delegation. Doctors solve the after usage of administrative powers entering a period of course during the overturn delegation. Criminal justice is a key best judgment. When the defender legal starter to find administrative delegation, criminal law, very high will set a feature like somebody what is it? I mean, for the next leader in the court will legally consider every support captain. The course of the center will play in a criminal litigation consider would be returning soon. The administrative study solves emerging security threats. That's Wisdom Bloom 15. The world when he starts to couple the life worldwide initially really just starting a punishing we get it. See, but they're powerful ways of the election of regulation. There's subject to the criminal preparation by law is a criminal law with the controls they sort of type military to do this. If it's a criminal establishment, the power in the first targets, the base of the city for the power to have to get this misuse and let it be the authorities or rushing regulations over the lever for poking out. Emerging texts are inevitable extinction and outweigh natural threats. Regulations solve the fact 14 emerging texts are available and up to the had been cities and not to start everything together. Everyone have that industrial smart level his reliability opposite to go you had by accident design for received many by the city over there's all of your responsibility line independent extension the single territory the play pathogens that are used by mature and the regulatory structure studies to military when probably as far as negligent possible religion university and the for the job and New York City in the city level of development maybe we can have an and perfect developed responses counterplan. The executive branch ought to implement criminal justice regulations in the United States and nuclear forensic research courts. Counterplan the United States judicial branch adopted criminal justice regulation in the United States and nuclear forensic science. That's the United States federal judicial branch will send that out. The advantage counterplan. The United States federal government should rejoin JCPO and abandon autonomous weapons and hypersonics to solve search. That's Piper. When companies are a little bit nuclear to defense of the island, if it's new studies on shooting because of your Russian nuclear force and Russia, and play with the limits. City Russia to get it extended without breaking just your weapons negotiation limit all weapons as well as trying to both there. T. Criminal justice, criminal law procedure, and the forms of that law. This is CGRS for criminal justice, criminal law, their criminal procedure, enforcement of the CCD defense of determined as part of the longer face criminal justice activity pertaining to enforcement of criminal law. That means Title 18. That's just 18 criminal justice by policy to government criminal case of criminal procedure government by substantive criminal laws found in Title 18. There, 50. Here's the link. Prefer predictable limits. Title 18 and most predictable starts for interpreting justice reform. Anything else on the topic makes meeting the pepper and impossible mood affairs in a flashing ground. Through jurisdictional laws, we can counterplaying governments that compete in the basic criminal reform and don't have contestable agent keywords. T. An act must be Congress courts are obligated to adopt clear intention to finance this permanent 94 net with the legislative action and defining the act but it is a legislative something nice but the law said it's because the law from the act of legislation delegated power doesn't enact laws that's Capolo 94 but the legislative delegated power to distribute legislation they produce like the authority make a legislation not delegate power to enact vote now particularly limits anything under else to made by allowing it to delegation of authority to prep impossible kills clash and court controversy course key ground kills fairness and the most important functional limit this side Biden can use his PC to get infrastructure but has without media is going to make a look by partisan of the playing accuracy covering taking capital that's levels or for hard to make better I was originally epidemics of super endorse for protecting not the AC and purposing integrity they can has a large popular build up party line interface so they will have a layer of leaf Harris my republican they own a triple ladder party loaded bunnies but if by parties that goes media and democratic republics it's a little bit highway and football alienation will be set up their coverage cancel the immigration and if it's a department party spending and basic personal language republican seriously CGR because they're implementing death time PC trades off and never consults him at 112 but not at least pushback media of looking at criminal justice reform we need your partnership and I get again if other repellents with the base and modern set but if it's the same campaign by the government so they tell me politically up a little ministry your priorities but I'm going to lead is going to any election uses America so you need to fight for time however to get any top 10 from leading reason democratic so divided CS is necessary and sufficient to curb the worst effects of warming federal legislative action in key and it triggers called on the Stokes and Greggis 21 by the be able to see it is some vision later for the shot of limited Congress focus on building an election to consider back when it's session you do like carbon political election power carbon free election is the US money 70% Challenge President is the federal policy to be setting yourself switching the national CS if you don't want to be president at the top of Congress to that prevents the talent as central risk warming that's well in 20 There's not much time over days that are caused to repass it. It's just being wasted in the middle planning this year. Definitely kind of make it up between less related ladies know if it's going to be done for season rest and green air for studies, but it would less than green is your civil because if current could moment away. It's not in the next time. So you're going to determine what happens. You're going to top of that. It is something that you'll be able to find over studies and really couldn't even the should be the legislative Chinese giving you some about the Chinese. The lake he just said the US facility in North Direction remains weak. We don't have much time. Case. Norris and New Tower, there's only some need limited that I was going to determine that for the house of purpose. He discovered the three data for the digital news and news security university. Like a later less of it non-existent model. It is uneducated and educated in middle of the new side as long as that had begun really linked to present to your charge that passed like he's going to set up there. He says the only data technically hit me first there is a new welcome shop but they still the degenerated in the ocean and fabricated bombs far-fetched at best. I said now that these conclusions Iraq and Afghanistan prove no nuclear escalation and mutual checkmate prevents the impact that's in a bush 15 even to do top of Libya to economically depend go for the real said we sort of concept I think they should be regional liberties with the power with the chairman is the US external Senate Department, so not upset the Department said it should say whatever the increase of fragmentation we heard about to sleep with the word of separation and compensating actable set of preventing bacteria advantage too. Norm enforcement causes status to the return prohibited political expediency that circumvents effective enforcement and triggers worsening conditions that determine IT status of the house what without the relationship member to the coverage not for the vehicle to identity identity even presumably beneficially like you should be the consideration of the because the political cities to the being interact and the second level to the hearts of the reaction about the international wives that ability and you consider companies to work on it nor consistency quickens or current proliferation the root cause of utilization the imposition of normative standards spent on 20 utilization practices to manage the system of policy the internet so the primary units have to the images organized the needle of the great public just what I think the converters terms of the weapon the usual degree consider me instead of badge on the academic reaction must be meaningful that the higher good fundamental normative is it's just legally some form of war is it got to coming now because the first target miscalculation intention stop retention forward or start temporary low yield which make caps oscillation that's not pushing the where the damage is for the reference that we have to get in the US and the US already endorse something that are first ability to be earned and have to generally be just probably for the US through the hand to save the war last year instead of avoidable boards where did it marked that avoidable wars right yeah, I didn't know how impact hypersonics that's missing or 19 hypersonic graduate working in the US that have hypersonic organization incredibly China City Russia have been working in the US literature video for news for hypersonic Germany recently the US have been suffering of the conventional capacity hypersonic that thing that's been hypersonic mystery operation hypersonic weapons and the US visibility difference of the companies of international drive military in Russia will escalate and hyperbole the chapter 18 with the Kurdish US retaliatory becomes a present of money that just said you code got to indicate that the escalation the US appears when there is a political strategy expected that is very late that a few in American houses and there's the cycle of the de-escalation started it sounds and that vagueness that can effective implementation. What is reform? How can they determine why is it so bad? It can't be done anything without that causes circumvention. No internal effective or insects attacks and research are happening in external environments outside of the US. Good for Cross.
All right. Status of the off.
Conditional.
Planks.
Yep. You're at a new F.
Yep. Delegation / emerging tech counterplan. What is your best piece of evidence that the non-delegation doctrine is going to be strong right now?
Richmond has an increase in cases.
Yep.
Which cases?
I mean, like the point is that they don't exist. It's new litigation. People are going to take up litigation to take down the
new litigation. Okay. Now. Do you have evidence that the court will rule in favor of the non-delegation doctrine on those new cases?
I believe it's there. It says that 6 justices support it, and we'll read more evidence in the 2NC.
Under Sorna, Chief Justice and Thomas joined Gorsuch. Alito noted if the court were willing to reconsider, I would support that. Kavanaugh noted Gorsuch's dissent.
Cool. Is there any counterplan that does not claim infrastructure as a net benefit?
No. Cool. I think all of them.
All right. How does this delegation counterplan shield the link to politics?
Delay. It indicates that it would take a while and delay passage and debate on the floor. We also think it would shield sort of political controversy because it would create sort of an objective consensus opinion on the matter.
But the part of delegating the plan or nuclear forensics to the DOJ is immediate. And then later the DOJ does the plan. That part makes sense. Why doesn't the delegation now take up floor time?
The delegation is less controversial litigation. It's not about the substantive content of the F, but rather like the procedure of it. We can have that debate if you like. No, okay. We didn't read we did not read a counterplan shields like the net benefit card in the 1 and C. We did not do that.
Family RK, just want to make sure, can the alternative enact criminal justice reform?
Danny? No.
No. Does the
Oh,
plan
yeah,
solve-
yes, it can.
Yes, it can. Oh,
Unmute yourself.
Sorry for the confusion. I had a brain fart. Yeah, it can. Or our critique isn't about criminal justice reform.
so what is the critique of? So does the alternative like,
Construction of threat, like international proliferation agreements, the ability of the illiberal international order, those things are all
Okay,
under the
so
auspices
the
of hard
alternative
masculinity.
does criminal justice reform, but it doesn't claim to solve the prolif impacts of the 1AC.
I don't think it does criminal justice reform. It's just like it's not related to that. Our argument is that rather we would reconceptualize the way the international relations works, which is the root cause to your conflict scenarios.
Okay, so it does not do criminal justice reform.
It
The
doesn't
alt
need to, but it
explicitly
doesn't.
does not.
It doesn't like exclude the possibility of criminal justice reform. It's
Doesn't
unrelated.
exclude the possibility of criminal justice reform. Okay, seems like the perm argument. Title 18. What is the violation? We're Title 50. Why?
Because I looked at nuclear
50.
forensics, the only code there is in Title 50 of the U.S. Code.
Okay. The norm enforcement stuff. So why does like the plan's version of the NPT cause North Korea to nuclearize more?
Danny?
CrossX was very indicative of this. You indicated that increased pressure on North Korea was the necessary internal link to encourage change from North Korea. We've linked turned that notion.
If power projection doesn't solve or doesn't like happen, if power projection doesn't change, you don't solve.
Okay. We're gonna take a little bit more prep as CrossX. Fine with everyone. So use power projection. This like Terman card and the Smetana evidence are both about like the United States and East Asian allies basically using their like, militaristic forces and to enforce norms, right? So
We made a
why
uniqueness
is that-
claim now that non-prolif norms are low, which is what's encouraging Korean proliferation, and that the plan would strengthen those by joining into a set of
Wait, but
strategies.
why does the plan strengthen those militaristic norms?
They're hand in hand. I don't know why the plan would develop militaristic ones. I could pull some lines. Your evidence, the Glazer evidence says that nuclear forensics are great because they establish a robust capability to generate security initiatives. And then further down, it says that, oh, this isn't about international stuff. Sorry, it's a new AF, don't blame me. But it says the second Glazer evidence is what I'm talking about, is that nuclear forensics are important in arms control verification because it sort of ensures to Russia that the US is kind of on its commitments, which increases the
Yeah,
legitimacy
but
of the
arms
said
control
commitment.
that results in-
Further is that said treaty, your Warden Ponda evidence says that would like allow for like people to prosecute North Korea. So like successful arms control treaty solves war, current modernization trends ensure North Korea will first strike, right? So I mean, this card doesn't really have an internal link, but we've impact turned the implication within this card, and it indicates that if you're attempting to use nuclear treaties to pacify North Korea, it does backfire.
We'll continue the rest as prep. We took 120 for CrossX, starting the rest now. All right, stop prep. That was 245 taken. So we're at,
Do you mind if I go to the bathroom while you send that out?
yeah, sure. 15 left for the app.
I'm glad you did the subtraction. You know, I'm gonna grab some water while Danny's out, but I'll leave myself unmuted.
Fantastic. Is someone missing? Okay, one person is still missing.
Danny's still missing. Yeah.
Okay.
Can I get an order?
Oh yeah, for sure. The order is going to be advantage 1, advantage 2, topicality,
What?
the T enact, then T title 18, the critique, the treaty advantage counterplan, the courts counterplan, the executive counterplan, the delegation counterplan, and then the disad.
Could you run back through real quick?
Oh, for sure. Advantage 1, advantage 2, modernization verification, T enact, T title 18, the critique, the treaties advantage counterplan, the courts counterplan, the executive counterplan, and then the disad. Everyone here, anyone not ready? Please verbally let me know if you're not ready. Fantastic. Modernization advantage, nuclear forensics, first modernization and data key to solve for a nuclear release and nuke terror, which ensures it sees that's Carsa, Epic, and well, nuke terror is likely back markets capability and nukes RS gives them unique access. The thereof doesn't account for plus nuclear forensics and nuclear key to solve for verification. Iraq and Afghan flows off pull makes them nuclear. Mutual checkmating is insufficient, doesn't apply to proliferation. Plan is key to create mutual solvency through verification regimes. F doesn't consider proliferation and Middle East nuclear proliferation. Verification advantage plan creates verification to solve arms control regimes internationally. Solves extinction through unregulated UAVs, Russia war and no-co war. Nuclear frenzy is a process now that Italy adapts and improves to solve for our deficits, which takes out deficits. The norm stuff, it's key to solve for norms of proliferation. And I'll finish this card. Optimistic any suspicion size solves armed racing. That's now so 15 units is the ability to maintain nuclear well for nuclear testing. CVD is effective verifiable. It's living off with the treaty of ratifying the obese practical and arms are surface clear and continuous cycle of development, design development, testing and nuclear interference that characterize the Cold War. U.S. ratification solves nuke pro of that substance. Building down effect during nuclear testing, they could have it. The United States reducing nuclear testing. Russian China would respond with their testing programs, their own right. United States, India, and then Pakistan might resume their testing program breakdown. Encourage other states to withdraw from the MPT, given the right to pursue nuclear weapons that means to produce themselves into China, into Pac war. That's now to do with further testing. Both Pakistan and India ideal to more efficient, boosted, efficient weapons, supply times. As for assignment, assessing for physical generation, they have nuclear arms race in South Asia. Only effective norms can solve for nuclear threats. That's now to begin to increase U.S. security. Only the use of nuclear weapons threatens the United States as a function society. The United States establish norms and legitimize nuclear weapons to strengthen the MT regime. Countries have far more to gain better reception of nuclear testing than the United States does. Nuclear power would need to test warhead in order to have a high confidence in reliability without such as military plans to be analytically to load warhead with new capabilities. Treaties independently solves because it's not just norms. AF isn't cyber, it's a nuclear forensics question and nuclear proliferation question. No-go is loose nukes, not cyber. Anyway, we independently solve through treaties, which solves their impact. Verification solves, which means they wouldn't cause any conflict. There's no cyber strike happening now, so it's not unique to their offense. Vagueness is one arbitrary. There's no rather for vague. Second is impossible to infer. We can't have a 50-page bill. Third is good because it solves for negative perverse incentive to make us check in ways that are bad for making it possibly affirmative. There's no bright lines. You should be hesitant to go for it. T and ACT, we mean plan text and vacuums that counter includes agencies that arise that 2K when agencies that relation judges from the results of consultation regulations legislation towards mark the current legislation. Prefer one overloading every app requires agency and activist markers. Kramer no date parts of the process of asking laws and having agency and activation that follow specific to precision designate agency rulemaking agency adjudication arbitrary justice counter only us 3 app flex for student agent specification because I would beat every app Congress only sex neg 2 for a negative 4 functional lives sports states abolition 5 reasonable prevent substance TCGR we mean 1 planet in vacuum vs criminal justice reform. Second legal for U.S. criminal code that's epic grand nuclear principle for legal forces of laws that federal court state nuclear material 3 counter criminal justice includes all states of legal process 8 criminal justice procedure running investigation prosecution trial the court and correction reforms being for all states of legal process criminal justice changes the system that formally process crime including law enforcement that's Davis criminal justice and environmental affairs that formally including law enforcement 4 predictability intent to find and include always arbitrary police on this controls research class always counter only counter only us 5 overly exclusion the entire area of forensic science by including review stacks that too far 6 functional limits after fed and Congress warrant 7 reasonability critique framework links to the plan not ref communicates causes 0 clashes just hypothesis targets are interactable exclude floating pigs extinction outweighs burn 17 is good for people this is billions of life people test appreciation dollars like respecting of information just respect their kill without consideration not breaking other creed your psychological effects of various apologies one with you perms use the lengths of the constitution separate gender analysis solve that library 11 not constrained from desire not constrained by ontology assumptions and new hierarchy thinking not just the truth of feminist theorizing but also with conflict resolution hegemon masculinity can't be frozen in a particular variable only the perm avoids essentialism that's pergy we engage with the boundary preference of other purchases inside the human also all things are just hegemonic masculinity freezing the particular variables we are left to guess what masculine seen more or less competitive the scene to apply masculinity find by big or suggesting for masculinity or social construction can overcome the advantage Kaplan first perm to which user recruiters action second prove the Kaplan third links in that benefit because Congress does it and it's Congress does it 4 I can't solve arm freezer modeling improve use nuclear forensic capabilities key to verification regimes which is uniquely key for countries that say no or Sheila Kaplan that's Glazer and Boyd 5 can't solve advantage one proliferation or terrorism doesn't modernize forensic techniques or increase R&D the Kaplan's attribution deterrence incredible that's no verification is key that's the entire advantage to Kaplan's need absolutely solve anything else is arbitrary and Rex fairness because there's no ground for answers it's a research incentivized research it's a research policy based about research they should have had a specific advocate courts Kaplan first perm do both second perm do the Kaplan third perm the United States federal government judicial branch should enact substantial criminal justice reform in the United States in nuclear forensic science 4 Kaplan must be functionally and technically combative forces never to be germane to the plan avoid penny less 5 links to that benefit because it's a distraction 6 funding courts can resume deteriorating and other research capabilities of the counterplan which is updated techniques and that undermine deterrence and origins races like Cartano Kisto and fun and all 1945 benefits the aim of nuclear testing improvements because include new hairs and budgets that are shrinking after have gone too far current budgets I don't have to include the province and the restful materials that U.S. World Security Congress should ensure funding constraints of efforts to reduce risk of nuclear terrorism and never slowed funding budgets to be increased to $513 million 7 capability of course can't moderate forensic analysis and labs prevents accurate tracing of materials 8 collaboration only Congress can collaborate laboratories and law enforcement officials to maintain trafficking that's the epic 8 9 spillover courts lack the mechanism necessary to strengthen international regulations only congressional action encourages governments to introduce rules 10 modeling nuclear forensics solely controlled by us 11 treaties are unverifiable with the courts agent conflicts about hurts after government process base advantage condos voter crisis strategy with sex fairness of the last African story picks are bad because fake plan right inflates bad net benefits capital research burden the executive capital first perm to by community action don't have enough benefit just a new response to make it full argument second perm the capital these functionally attached to 3 perm insert tax 4 perm capital be functionally attached to the benefit 5 links to that benefit cross-apply other stuff delegation capital Perm do both. Derby has review delegation solve the internal. Perm to the counterpoint happens to text the function to the key background. Reaching class perm to the counter plan to the counter process after the perm to the plan upload the delegation document function to the agenda mandate of the counter server via can solve advanced question of the relation. That's after both finding incredible in arms control regime. That's on the course counter. These you can't do the plan. They're not financial access to fund it and can't coordinate with other agencies. No spillover nor impact. That's CEOs 18 dollars. We can talk about much influence. Only years on these document literally the list instead of fundamental forces. These rates normally time expertise like our expertise. Delegation fails is worse for emergency attack. That's needs to be done for joint partners with the agency and do with also the data has been to the first agency make hash out of status. There's no overturn now. Biden disproves infrastructure defense. Won't pass in this 416 years old because there's a couple seniors having infrastructure many things out in backford, but backford can also regulation provisions killed by brutal objectability to the infrastructure. They very skilled enough for going to be malleable. Anyone down can say I've had enough tons of numbers at CNN 412 Congress for the privileges to have immigration at odds over the border and conversation deal remains out of infrastructure taking much passion impacting the law. It's hate crimes that human that is facing resistant Dems, like even 50 for election over convention, and then progressive Dems will backlash false laws with Blue Ferris 4 season Dems leaders passed by Julia for the members and all the full Congress must pass this information bill. Either issues are compartmentalized and the plan doesn't spill over, or the link is not that's fine. 412 Biden is moving forward the efforts toward backing police reform through legislative chambers. Biden is working to constantly act reform our top priorities areas of the science justice and policing act into law. The White House's attention shifted legislative mechanisms. We focus on working with members and move things forward. The bill faces an uphill climb in the Senate. Winners when plan bills Biden's consensus that makes Biden more people winning influence in harms from this stimulus. Turn the app loves the app. The Congress loves the app. That's the 11 Congress even nuclear frenzy overwhelming. So with the nuclear frenzy after reaching not past the House Order 216 and Senate by unanimous consent focused on nuclear weapons and materials. Even the secret congressional support options of interest in Congress involve how to strengthen radical forensic capability, not whether through international thumps, their internal like a bill can't solve warming. That's pretty much 21 suffering doing little sort of manufacturing production possible fuel consumption. The fact excludes the efficient price on carbon buying strong for projects users who like comparison on kind of the scale of the higher problem demand. So if future response using Fenny to Shibi and think about quick boost volume shop play project, those are the ones that lead to decarbonization. That card is being sent now.
When we get it, I'm good.
Fantastic.
All right, good.
Yep.
First question, theoretical reasons.
Okay. Conditionality, solvency advocate for counter plans, picks, agent counter plans, floating picks. Is that it?
Okay.
Yeah, I think that's it. If there's something else, I'll let you know after.
Would you mind just
Yeah,
compiling that via text and then sending that via email? I just see you spoke kind of fast and I couldn't catch you.
What?
Like, is it possible for you to just like write that all down in text and send it? You just spoke kind of quickly and I couldn't catch you, so I don't want to waste our time.
Solvency advocate, condo picks, floating picks, agent counter plan, counter plans. Is that all I said? 1, 2,
Yeah.
5. I think that's it.
All right. Cool. What's a solvency advocate?
A solvency advocate is of equivalent quality to the 1AC, which is non-arbitrary. So, for example, you have literally no solvency.
You can't just say it's not arbitrary. What's equivalent quality? Like, what does a solvency advocate do?
A solvency advocate is so a piece of evidence that supports the either counter plan or the plan, which has to be of equivalent quality to the 1AC, which is our interpretation.
Okay, so the dissent is the reason the counter plan is good. Is that a solvency advocate?
Well, you saying so is not a solvency advocate because it's not a piece of evidence. Second, it's not.
But anyone else saying so is. That's fine. Delegation counter plan.
Obviously, yeah. What?
Delegation counter plan. The Stiglitz evidence. Where do you think this makes a no impact argument?
What, the first card or the second card?
Stiglitz. So first card, I guess.
Yeah. So the card specifically talks about how the non-delegation doctrine is specifically ineffective in regards to how it can affect anything. So the doctrine itself, either delegation or non-delegation, both of them are ineffective in influence of lawmaking behavior and doesn't spill over because of the nature of the doctrine.
Okay, that's compelling internal link defense, not a no impact argument. Fourth perm, just above that, this just adds the federal judiciary like overruling non-delegation doctrine. Am I correct in that? That's the only thing that makes it the fourth perm.
The fourth perm,
just introduces judicial action,
3.
And you say that competes because it's the mandate of the plan.
Yeah, it's functionally legit, so it competes because it's functional and textual competition. So it upholds the doctrine, so it solves. Because you are functionally upholding the doctrine, even if it's not textual. Because the result of the counterplan, the function of the counterplan is upholding the doctrine.
Okay. Cool. Advantage counterplan. Your stuff saying international stuff reliable says, quote, international and domestic databases could make it more difficult for the US to convince countries of a US conclusion. Why aren't US databases obviously just as bad?
I didn't read that card, but it's specifically that piece of evidence distinguishes between international and domestic. It says domestic is better because it convinces other countries. I know that card. I didn't read that card though.
Okay, cool. Good call. That's time.
Fantastic.
We're gonna take prep. That's 9:03 starting now.
We can stop that. I used 1 minute and 2 seconds, or 1 minute and 3 seconds actually, so that leaves us 8 minutes. Saving and sending. Okay, the order while I'm sending this out is it's title 18. The second advantage, the first advantage. Does anybody need a repetition of that order? I'll repeat it for my own sake, frankly. T, advantage 2, advantage 1. Okay. It's not.
Hey, hold on. You turn on your volume. Okay, so you said T title 18 advantage 2 advantage 1.
Yes, and I sent the wrong talk.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, that's a pattern.
Yeah. It's okay.
A lot of that going around.
A little struggles today. I have to go find this girl. Okay, there we go. Now I have the right one. It should be sent out now with the right one. I'll wait upon your receipt of that. I'm gonna get some water in the interim. Okay. Is anybody besides me not ready? No? Okay. Excellent. On one of the largest topics is an overwhelming bias and hypergeneric bad negative on maintaining a stable boundaries. The only way to preserve clash and fairness, the foundation for such a debate, our interpretation that criminal justice reform requires changing criminal law procedure or enforcement under Title 18, which the NCJRS and Justia evidence limits on the topic outweigh. One is that a framing issue above matches demonstrates every limiting factor necessary to create substantive clash to the app on has limits on the topic. Title 18's provision for criminal justice. I think less statutory language is vaguely permits criminal enforcement to be the option of regulation because the topic is pan-directional speaks. Abortion, gun control, licensing, military justice, and immigration crimes, etc. All possible from debaters. Run to the margins, which means the Title 18 is a crucial check. Three clash to outweighs we do debate for different reasons because it's intrinsic, because it community to screen find nuance, prepared to keep the game going. Lack of ability to keep makes the plan keeps to keep up. Burns the value when debate. The tweets was a little bit flippy, so I didn't catch some arguments that's justified in the two and articulate some new answers that are extrapolated from here. But first, as I caught a broader we made argument that's not true. The link that I sent below is explicit about nuclear forensics as a part of Title 50. The title in particular indicates that it's about the research and development plan for nuclear forensics and attribution, which is what their evidence is also about. Just because they read this legal definition that indicates otherwise does not mean that they escape that, because the evidence that they read is just a single line about a single definition about nuclear materials. Even if they want this extra topicality is bad because it still leads to all our limits and ground offense. It means there's no substance check on the negative. It means the affirmative can do anything that's vaguely correlated to Title 18 in order to garner offense, which would still link to our the reverse case. It's about plain text in a vacuum. Step one is bad. At least our offense standards, Dex extra T turns vagueness to incentivize race to the bottom for the biggest plain text to disincentivize neck from reading the best T in terms. Two alternatives, positionality, highlight important solvency advocates. 20C causing 2C clarification solves vagueness terms are clarified by the block. Two is to extra T3 presumptively specify C drop and mandate is a criminal justice reform creates plan means they do nothing for it, means that they can just use the whole resolution, which is and then make that completely devoid of their offense, which means that which is kind of what they did in this debate. The counter interpretations first is that you can group them because neither of them have significant intent to define, exclude, or are coming from qualified sources that provide or that are providing definitions on a legal basis. The first piece of evidence from a professor of economics, which out an intent to define, just describe what the criminal justice process looks like. The second piece of evidence does not have any intent to exclude or describe or depict anything as a single line from a random dictionary that does not have actual intent to differentiate anything. The just the evidence, however, is a legal definition that indicates that it is clear that civil rules of procedure and Title 18 are the only points of states on the topic, which is the necessary internal link to negative limits. But if you didn't do that, I have inserted a list of every title for reference, which is the Cornell Law No Data Evidence. It indicates there are 54 different titles. All of those have different things that can be interpolated under different subject areas of the topic. Criminal justice reform independently is made because criminal laws exist in literally every other title, which means that only Title 18 is able to set a sufficient standard, because otherwise the topic becomes completely unmanageable for the negative. In this case, there's two framing issues. One is that internal link, the internal link, the impact outweighs the impact itself. We act as a very proximate impact to internal link to limits because the T Title 18 is it's a distinct referendum that avoids an obviation of limits, which means that you win a more proximate internal link to things like after-ground or over limit or impact to after-ground or over limiting. We win a more approximate internal link. Second is that you strongly air negative. I did a lot of that in the overview, but independently Title 18 flips descriptive uniqueness. Even if they win that the topic right now might be difficult for the affirmative, they make the topic complete, then win for the negative. It makes next generics impossible. Three is that affirmation will be inevitable, which is the terminal impact of their over limiting, and it's the TOC, which means that there's no terminal impact or innovation because people who innovate within those parameters. The predictability, precision stuff, I'll do it here. One, we'll insert this if you go for the evidence comparison because ours is better. A is source, she is pyramid, professor for criminal law, their evidence is contextualized from bigger law, economics professors. We said a unifying definition, be intended to find just actually lays out the clues for criminal justice reform. The evidence happens to use two terms of congruency, two debatability outweighs. A, this topic is unique without a unifying legal document. Predictability is a worthless question. It's a question making large topics tenable, and it's April. People are aware of big T violations, community consensus, and strategy necessary to provide. There's no ability to set a model through predictability. And the terminal impact of predictability is about the ability to find definitions, which is no longer applicable. C, competing interpretations framework in which the model should be the norm, not which one is, which means we get a fiat interpretation. Precision is a threshold, also not a competition. We win our interpretations sufficiently precisely to debatability. There's three reasons. A is that it's qualitative. There's no way to quantify which interpretations are legally based. B is arbitrary, random, protest, and provide grounding for the internal impact. C, no terminal impact to precision. This TOC strategy decides more. They say counter just after threshold has not been met to meeting a T violation because you need something that actually has a definition or intent to exclude or anything. You can't just assert that the counter just our second is that it kills ground based on actual criminal prosecution, which kills research, which was their standard. We could just have debates about their topic for the entire year without still be bad. Three is that it's at least all their over limiting offense because it means that there will be literally just one app, which means that we topics we get still, which internally concerns our offense. We, however, provide an effective balance because Title 18 still has a broad variety of aspects, but not into a way where it's untenable. The functional limits. What? One, no topic unifying literature means there's no net benefit offense. The T term is the crucial internal link to this. Two, functional limits, but the ball the asking allowing them to massive pace to assume and prepare against strategies. We can't strategy against T violation. Three, linear risk or impact outweighs the reasonability. One, there's unreasonable. That's about two. Clash on model force to comparison between interpreters. Just critical thing. Reasonable. That's actually their interpretation which always a skill. Three, bright line lack of each other inevitable sex fairness. Advantage two. We have impact turn their modeling claims about treaty ratification and the ability to apply pressure to North Korea because they not only backfire, but they ask norm enforcement impossible and they externally cause resentment and make other actors more prone to proliferation and stability, especially in North Korea, but not including, which they've conceded. I'll explain both. One is the internal term. The affirmative makes effective proliferation treaty changes networks because populous nations are not planning on actually changing their behavior. Rather, the AF inflames their tendencies and entices more abuses against proliferation or to provide political legitimacy instead of embrace of norm notion of deviance to determine evidence. If the risk of modeling is linear or per nation are arguments of the reverse, those nations are more likely to bandwagon with violence. 2, the external impact it outweighs since units would encourage no code 2, advance our military capacity to fuel nuclear possibility, which guarantees balance on the peninsula. That was our terminal impact. The root cause to that is labels of promotion of the norms, which they've conceded. That's the Smetana, and that's what Smetana evidence. That turns lines infrastructure, Carnegie and Carson in 18, despite widespread poverty to transfer modern resources more complex or greater institutional transformation, something like among groups of power spoons, and attention can be counterproductive because if the course of diplomacy, friend, cooperation, public side identification lead to other defectors while high levels of complex reduce to proceed, appropriate validate norm actually complies with result of this with the his particular stigma hiding transgression. That's the only attractive but important. I pre-marked that the first argument they beefed this actually because their only answer to this was just the affirmative results in norms. We have impact on those norms because we have said that they result in more inflagration vis-a-vis North Korea because the United States results in its own set of legitimacy through treaty ratification and complies with the international standards, which gives it the moral capital. I'll read some evidence. Even then, the sort of rules-based order is terminally unsustainable. Flaws in the order structural because norm setting Western hypocritical mission on 20 of the post. Cold War rules-based order is not been delivered. The West world is definitely when it comes to shift rules. As I say, it seems to be guiding philosophy, black matter movement. Intersection of all country terms of play down to crisis showcase loophole in the Western narrative similar. The twin legislatures for right-wing populism, Europe, crisis discrimination, just rules means that the Western non-Western civil conflict to client failure to give here to COVID and to conduct regarding spread as a telltale. Now, you might be wondering where's the link to the affirmative because norms already exist. It's not our argument. Effective prohibition locks the norms because everyone is currently aware that soft power institutions like the MPT and the IAEA hold no teeth because of not compliance. The affirmative attempt to do as I say, not as they do is the link. However, law promotions and hegemonic strength are distinct. Under Cohen 15, some difference which is DB laws are a crucial part of this. When we think about DB, we think about violation of international norms, rooted in law expectations, codified laws, past space, or actually understanding the norms as a DB requires a return to the hegemon to point out no more violations. We DB from the position taking international side of meetings of the normative board was important for applying this technology for the power of the legitimacy of the hegemon were elected on the transition and edge normative can become less visible. Now the thesis to it, the affirmative does backfire and actually I'll just ignore the line by line stuff. You can group their norms and arms racing stuff. These is our argument that they don't actually result in anything. The arms racing and the ratification style stuff, those are all warrants. They had warrantless. They only were random speculations about potential remodeling, but we're definitely winning the risk that it backfires. The solid interpack stuff I'll do later, but the F backfires and causes network deviant behavior. Term has a few warrants. One is in-group psychology, shapes of political response. The applications are large and sensible American influence because they're construction of friend psychology. 2, political power drive from legitimacy. People continue because otherwise the rewards included to pose equal complete to 3 empirical examples. Save second on Iran. Women more likely to be shown for infidelity. The next argument was Indo-Pac. I'll do some of that here. Or actually go to the other advantage. I'll do that first. No nuclear terror. The Mueller evidence says that it's incredibly difficult to achieve an effective nuclear bomb. The affirmative does not necessarily resolve any of these things because there's still the ability to do things on international soil, which the affirmative does not result in. They say that they say that these will result in the markets are at all costs. That, but the Mueller evidence says that it's incredibly difficult because it starts in more domestic policing. Because domestic policing, the status quo, that makes that incredibly unlikely. Their evidence is speculative from when the collapse of the Soviet Union, which when some Soviet states had nukes, but they immediately turned them over, which proves our impact and means that there's no terminal. The Middle Eastern war, their evidence here says that there are external dependencies into cost balancing, which means that even in a world where there's nuclearization, the larger hegemony powers would have a say against it, which would answer that. Their answer to this was said that it would create spillover effects, but that doesn't matter in a world where cost balancing outweighs. Their evidence, the Indo-Pac is wrong. It's apart 928 the test. I'm sure to give an opportunity for you to read by hyper nationalist figures very similar to the Pakistan age whenever indulged direct would inflict more damage to political and military leaders of both countries than the mass also do it to and see counterplan this as the United States should sort of engage in negotiation with India and Pakistan and provide financial incentives for both to cooperate. Let me send that counterplan text out.
While you're sending that, could you also send a marked copy? Just like take out.
Oh yeah. Why don't I just put
You didn't read, yeah, just to simplify it because I know you marked a couple cards. Yeah.
Also take some.
I think the card that you read on the first advantage is not in this doc, right?
What do you mean?
Is it? Wait, is
The
it
first card I think I read.
R924? You read a card in the first advantage, right?
Yeah, the Carson evidence. It was just under. It's under the overview. The United States federal government.
Carson, do you
No,
mean
that's on the second advantage.
Yeah, Carson was in the second advantage, but I don't think you sent the card that was in the first advantage that you were reading.
Oh, that was just under Indo-Pac. Sorry, I just answered it on the wrong advantage.
There's nothing under Indo-Pac here. There's no Indo-Pac.
The card just isn't the doc. Could you just
Yeah,
just
yeah,
resend
set
it?
the doc with all
Okay,
the
no
red-
worries. Yeah, it'll happen there.
marked card. Yeah,
Thank you.
Okay, I need to. Honestly, I have to take breaks. I have to tell Nicholas a few things. I'll do it now. We stopped at, we used 28 seconds. We currently have 8 minutes, so 28 seconds off of that would make it 7:22. Let me send out the smart version. Okay, all that's been sent out.
All right, we'll let you know whenever we get it. Is your word working? Keep both. Let's see, R7 to. Okay, so my word is not able to open your 2NC file. And I'm getting the Mac thing that's just like you need access permission. Microsoft Word, yeah. So how about we try a couple things? Could you try sending it again? Make a new doc, copy paste everything in there, please. That might work. If not, in the past I've had to just like restart, and everyone else.
Maybe I could send it out. I have access to the doc. What's the card that needs to be sent?
Don't send the same doc because that's corrupted for me. Create a new document, copy paste everything that's into that document into the new one and send, please.
Okay,
Because
I
I
think
just-
Danny's got that because I assume it's with the doc itself.
I just can't open the doc. I swear Mac verbatim and Mac word is just so bad.
It's actually the Nuclear malware on your screen right now.
Because I can open, I was able to open the first one. And like we're usually able to open files. Wait, are you able to open the file? Let me see. And that wouldn't be helpful if I can't get it on my computer. I think they reset. Is it? Oh yeah, that's the recut. Or like the.
I sent it.
I can open it, so I can put it in the Dropbox if that helps.
I sent all of it.
Hold on. Round 7. Oh, yeah, it's still not working. Okay, so what I'm gonna have to do is restart my computer. Yeah, rough. Just give me, it should take like 2 minutes, okay? Okay. We can like show you that we're not stealing crap. Yeah, like it's very obvious.
I'm gonna start 10 minutes of tech time just in case.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
appreciate the surveillance though.
Well, we're using tech time. I'm just gonna go to the bathroom real quick. I don't know why I have to go to the bathroom.
I'm gonna sit down, but I'm not gonna move my computer. There's no way for me to still prep because this is my computer, but
Nah, don't worry. I trust you. So if this doesn't work, an alternative is literally just send out the entire thing in the body of the email, worst case scenario.
That's certainly the worst case scenario, but you know, happy to do it if it comes to that.
Yeah.
All right, give me a sec to join back on Zoom. Seems to be working, so I think we're good.
Okay.
All right, my volume is.
You back?
Yep. Fantastic. Sorry about that. Are you open for cross-ex?
Yeah, I'm good.
Great. Let's start off with this topicality violation. What piece of evidence that you read do you think substantiates the claim that nuclear forensic science is not criminal justice reform?
I was feeling lazy, and not to beat a dead horse, it was a new AF, but I did send a link to Cornell. We can explore that together. So the Title 50 of the US Code, Section 2574, is about enhancing nuclear forensics capabilities.
It's about forensics, or it's about nuclear forensics. It doesn't say forensic science. And why is that why does that mean that law enforcement nuclear forensic science isn't in criminal justice reform? How is that an exclusive statement? It's an inclusive statement that it could be Title 50.
Well, I mean, your evidence is all about, like, if that's true, then plain text in a vacuum and nuke your AF, because you don't have evidence about domestic law enforcement. Your evidence is all about quote unquote nuclear
Incorrect.
forensics, which is broader.
Like, in fact, we read a specific part in the 2EC about law enforcement capability. So the threshold for meeting your violation is just law enforcement.
That's not the case. Our argument independently of that is that law enforcement, even if they do nuclear forensics work, would be under Title 50. I have literally no other.
Law enforcement would be under Title 50.
You have to pull up. You have to pull up the section of Title 18 that you think meets that law enforcement parameter.
Real quick, let's talk about your violation or your interpretation card. Criminal justice means criminal law, the law of criminal procedure, and the array of procedures and activities having to do with the enforcement of this. Why?
Yeah, so
do we have
enforcement of Title 18 shit. Your shit's not Title 18.
Where does the first piece of evidence talk about Title 18?
Well, if you want me to pull it up, I can. But the evidence says, let me go get it.
It's talking about
The evidence says criminal justice means criminal law, the law of criminal procedure, and enforcement of that body of law, i.e. criminal law. Then
Sure, it means
the CCA, the Crime Control Act defines that term as saying that law enforcement and criminal justice, which is the resolution, is any activity pertaining to the enforcement of criminal law. Criminal law earlier has been defined.
Let's talk about the just evidence. Where is it exclusive and say that criminal justice is only Title 18? It says it's governed by Title 18. It doesn't say reform can't be other things besides.
It says it's found in Title 18. I think that's sufficient.
It includes Title 18. Why is it not other things besides Title 18?
Okay, so this is going to become like a precision predictability argument. Here's a few things. One is that your evidence is frankly no fucking better. Two is that it is a threshold. We have met that threshold because this has found a definition and says that criminal justice is generally found in Title 18. You have no evidence that says that the affirmative is exceptional.
So your threshold for topicality is just saying, criminal justice includes Title 18. Maybe
it is found in Title 18. It is found in Title 18. Criminal justice reform, i.e. criminal law, is found in Title 18.
So at the end of this round, what line are you going to tell the judge for why nuclear forensic science is not included in criminal justice reform? What line that you've read?
There is a link that demonstrates a full set of the titles, like the entirety of the United States Code. It says that it is in Title 50. If you want to have the counter-interp debate, that is distinct. You have violated. That's pretty clear.
All right, that's fine.
Oh my God.
All right. Saving and sending now. Danny, if you could mute yourself on Discord, I would be very thankful. Yep. That's a blank email. Here's an email that isn't blank. Well, it sounds like if the order, it's going to be the executive counterplan, the advantage counterplan, courts, which is where I'm putting conditionality and solvency advocate theory. Apologies. Advantage one, the delegation counterplan. Anyone need a repeat of that? Cool. Exec.
Yeah.
Yep. Exec, advantage, like treaties counterplan. Courts, the first advantage, delegation counterplan. All good.
Give us a second, sorry. Delegation counterplan.
You say the middle, please. Can you say the order again? My flows are
Yeah.
so, like
All good. Exec, treaties, courts, first advantage, delegation counterplan. And courts will contain conditionality and solvency advocate theory.
Fantastic. Whenever you're
Yep.
ready.
Executive counterplan concede firm people they're not going for theories or reject the reason to reject the argument, not the team advantage counterplan concede firm people theories or reason to reject the argument, not the team that K will concede firm people theories or reason to reject the argument, not the team, but we're in a floating pick, so no late courts counterplan conditionality is good Netflix basically negative results to negate the resolution conditionality provides the crucial strategical Netflix release he took committed equity and balancing FI search for the best policy option and the preferable efficacy after pieces just provides all the more reason that the over strategic thing we first have to think strategic which makes arts that making that 2AC time and strategies are inevitable peace will all be faster than others theory T will produce the time and strategy straight up all humans are initially conditional. You can't force to go for any particular flow. Most real world have how they should reject proposals in light of alternatives all the time. Debate should be no different. Counter interpretation, dispositionality. There's all their contradictory and irresponsibility arguments. You should err on theory on an FI's topic. Reject the argument, not the beam potential beliefs in a voter because they can't articulate and you're on abuse. Solvency have a counter interpret. We get to test the Congress key warrant for new F. Station counterplans are the only option on an FI's topic, and the new F justifies that we haven't figured out how to beat on the counterplan yet. Counterplan. They counterplan delegates the authority to do the plan, the executive is implement the after administrative crimes, not of the legislature, kill the policies, not benefit the power precedent for executive to consult to agency regulations that are able to because court is slated to pick another case to issue country decisions not absent that. Now delegation will failure making administrative agency work impossible that causes extinction through emerging agency action prevents unmitigated unknown threats, but even if potential catastrophe, lack of knowledge means you air strongly air next especially if you're quantifiable to AC solvency with impacts and benefit judging the logical extension of conditionality. Don't get fooled. They didn't read any impact defense on this flow, which means any risk is a reason to do the counterplan. Sorry. Advantage one. No Russia war because of economic independence that our card uses sort of empirics that illustrate that states don't go to conflict specifically with Russia because they're economically interrelated with each other. Counterplan. Permeable thinks that benefit kills the opportunity cost of judicial determination of administrative crimes because the Congress clarifies the criminal category, citing that agency doesn't administer the crime in the first place. Changing the law, most cases, jurisdiction is limited to actual controversies and standing or ripeness over one that dismisses the case. SCRS 7 jurisdiction limited actual case of the country's setting graveness and business center just whether plaintiff or ripeness or usually adjudication must say the auto station proceeding personal initiative the actor with disputes that capable of the established record. Dismissal like of jurisdiction change in law. There's no need to understand. Of course, won't review new cases. That's Luke 5. The U.S. Constitution requires the casualties of federal court to pass subject dismiss the action regarding the party user essential links in that benefit joint delegation of both branches decided to implement a bill has legislative inertial that's Seagull 15 and determining what is the recent intelligent license rate of security agency reducing implicating numbers of the government the agency readily later all these senate judgments because the Congress is fairly reconciled to delegation use of vetoes a control because it provides the role in the enactment joint resolution for the agency effect of the Congress side for words or in addition to constitution you get the power to take the legislative court and an obligation to action perm to the counterplane sectors that were sexually functionally harassed. Obviously, that was through distinction, not our well, they picked the bad F USFG is all three branches. That's Cunningham 97 for the national government. D means all parts as Merriam Webster. A the user group is a whole guy makes a counterplane to pick out its three branches or from a statutory that's Scotch 16 required requires statutory changes. Those are distinct from rules which are delegated regulations that LAI no date regulations the narrows are being regulations functionally delegated power doesn't enact or appeal laws. You have to enact law with a counterplane adopts this Polo 94 but is legislated delegated the authority make a bill may not get the next it should be certain to mean it that summer's 94 legal all the court of should be a percentage meaning modest video president if you separate subordinate clashes sustain your journey possible making the half a movie the other issue from it is functionally not limited because the premise describable limits interpretive texts you're going to kill effective journey of mechanisms that are crucial part of the CGR topic it justifies utopian theatrical competition with net benefit scramble for education are bad they get the core meaning text discussion they move the purpose of the act kills not great for purpose both to serve for clash carries artificial advantages to functional shooting cause utopian theater news fairness and functional independent textual functional competition debate instead of a senior hilarious policy at the added studies where no cost of moves the traditional method of journey at least in that benefit the judicial plank really enough for there to be struck down to use and of course back to his descriptions like ruling on it or true and our evidence if necessary the fourth part of is functionally triggered because as a test case the counterplane is just sort of the existence of enforcing the doctrine the DOJ stuff no shit it delegates the necessary authority to do the plan which means that it doesn't sort of necessarily hinge on existing authority but it's inclusive of resources necessary for that it would be delegated by Congress as part of the counterplan no spillover it's not no impact card it's derivative of the status quo the counterplan is key to rebalancing and the delegation will be triggered by the just in the next applicable case after Gundy has lost in 19 we're going to conditional as the later and the founding crimes determine Congress the it just trigger what is it determined let next take the constitution conservative and Gundy answering none of these questions grace them the doctor is serious we had none of their cases for post-date Gundy the 930 Tucker assumes Frey Gundy is on the brink now warrant for failure's lack of will not sort of procedural stuff. And the delegation fails argument, this was written right after Trump got into office. The warrants are all about sort of Trump officials being idiots, not sort of like structural warrants for why the executive agencies can't actually do it. Biden obviously solved that in the eye of their author, and agency regulation is key. That's in March 20. It'll take the work putting yourself the rest of the develop control, make the governance of the responsibility companies and if I will change the way conflict are fought by as well. I think the government invading public privacy. If we do our homework, we are prepared.
Start prep 5:15.
Or is it 7:15?
Sorry, 7:15. Start prep. Start prep. 3:25 taken. What was our prep at? We started at 7.
I have you at 3:48.
3:48. Oh, okay. That leaves us with what? 3:15 plus 12 seconds, so 3:27. Cards are going to be sent in 2 docs. One is going to be sent during the speech. That's fine. advantage 1, then the T violation, infrastructure DA, the counter plan, and then advantage 2 at the bottom.
I'll give the order one more time. Modernization advantage, T Title 18, infrastructure DA, counter plan advantage 2. Yep. All right. Let me just pull up the extra thing that he sends. All right, done. Is anyone good? Perfect. Yes, sir. His opponent's intent to express it openly. Reason when his capabilities, there have been multiple instances of people stealing terror. That's all the epics. Whenever it's supposed to their evidence, yes, Middle East where the nuclear breath proliferation and UConn has not been dismantled. This all ways there is there time for that their evidence does not assume that nuclear forensics is a process, not even topicality title 18. We mean plan fiats in a vacuum. Criminal justice form not arbitrary because they use the words in the resolution. Anything else such as cross-ex or solvency advocates via positional compensation is 1 arbitrary, 2 unverifiable, 3 basis burdens. Do not vote negative on presumption because the plan provides info for the law enforcement as for the federal code. That's the epic evidence. So we substantially as well vagueness. They have dropped from the 2AC. The vagueness is good because the neck has monopoly on prepper and vagueness. There's no bright line. It justifies including whole rights. No, because otherwise this would lose the picks out of words like criminal justice reform. Words like criminal justice reform. The nuclear forensic response to criminal acts and agents and victims. Federal code. It's absolutely no person size. Trafficking trafficking laws and criminal justice. These links say that we meet the. We don't have to read them. Their model of if you think that you shouldn't have to go through all of these links, then they have not made a complete topicality argument because they have never even put in the effort because Danny was too lazy to cut that link. Counterinterpretation criminal justice reform includes all stages of the legal process. That's his evidence. A college professor Davis says criminal justice system is law enforcement. They have a PhD in writing a criminal justice dictionary. Before me changes go Google dictionary to me. Make changes to the moment to prove massive precision deficit. The just see evidence is federal procedure does not define criminal justice reform. The predictability outweighs criminal justice reform at all stages. Includes front and background. Includes evidence for trials like nuclear forensics. Intent to define include Trump arbitrary appeals. Otherwise, counter only solves. We better access the research class. Over limiting the function includes all forensic science staff. I mean they cut the res to 2/3 functional limits. Abolition states CSR courts filter in the next cases, and we'll concede they get infinite conditional advocacy. This is a question of which effort strategic reasonability about insufficient defense is not subjective to interpretation. Shift goal is to zero substance infrastructure. Yikes! Trump straight turn. They said it's a net benefit to every counterplan, including delegation. Vote passed now because splintering and lack of bill. Winners win thesis was also dropped. Plan bills momentum allowing Biden to pass it. The plan is bipartisan. We have dropped evidence that cites empirics of nuclear forensics being overwhelmingly popular, and so it increases Biden's political capital independently. Plan solves warming, which is separate term via international collaboration. The process counter plan, the permutation to the plan, and the counter plan's planks over a different area was dropped. It solves a net benefit. They don't have a reason why the counter plan over the plan is he solves the independently permutation to the plan and have the judiciary overturn non-delegation. That's functionally but textually intrinsic. So counterplans would be talking about functionally and sexually competitive, and this terms that are either sexually or functionally intrinsic, but not both. One is after ground. Burning counterplans that are solely compete on one axis reads the game in favor of the negative base. Right night commissions consult and refer all who they can pick out of infinite process because they a normal means to define terms like should and resolve that they did in this debate. So you can be enough certainty, no deficits, reliability exists. 2 is research process counterplans has block recycling, kill topic education, safe breeder that erases in-depth research. 3 is clash. Apps only hope is against personal theory. At least it's try to net ground. They did not say this, but there's no link. They preserves net ground. They can reprocess counterplans. They can also have core CSR and states. Our impact outweighs after ground is a prerequisite to net because they get the block. They also do not get linked to Scrabble perms. No link for the perms to be textually legitimate or functionally legitimate. It must include the entire entire plan in order, and all of the parts of the counterplan in order means the text can predict all possible permutations with a smart counterplan test ready independently for the firms to be functionally legit, must include the functions of the entire plan, so they can predict it and have DS to it. And the uncertainty of BDC stuff, not intrinsic. Adding delay or uncertainty is a function of the counterplan we can predict, as is adding the ability of the Congress to do something app flexibility. They make Cheeto veto and all process counterplans competitive. Enact means the process of making new process. Roosevelt 19 down the process of making process enacted. A new process for the system. The process for the process so it's independently framing issues we need one definition, because that means that we can start immediately start a process that is uncertain and delayed. Solvency, we're conceding that the counterplan solves the entirety of advantage 2. We are only making subsets to advantage 1. The finality deficit actors in the United States will not know that modernization is important if the law in the books does not change. That delegation will not be overturned right now. I should independently internally certain delegation worse than by just preferences, Martha preferences, advantage 2. North setting is definitely good. Only measures ensure safeguards. Not sufficient on the safety. I'm something the preference plans on the constitution. I'm U.S. ratification brings other countries on board. That's it solves North Korea impact on nuclear testing, which the North setting does succeed. And there's no external impact. One is they've conceded that there's no cyber attack coming out. Two is that the affirmative solves that justice plus the status quo, because North Korea is using nukes RS. They've dropped the external loose nukes impacts that North Korea is selling to Iran, Syria, etc. Plan makes norms sustainable. Drop the weak, create verification regimes, which answers their evidence that force countries to comply. The first that's all in the greater evidence of nuclear archaeology.
We have 722. Order is advantage 2, the disad, the counter plan, advantage 1. I'll repeat that order for good measure. Advantage 2, disad, counter plan, advantage 1. Okay, is anybody not ready? Okay. Let me get my timer. Okay, cool. Oh, ooh, shit, I forgot my text doc. Sorry, give me a sec. Just have to slide that over to my other space. Okay, I'm good. They have dropped way too much in order for them to resuscitate the offense on this advantage. We have a massive link turn to the notion of ratification of treaties, the creation of compliance, and the ability to pressure other nations through the U.S. leadership, which solves that operates at a United States level. There's a really important frame because your crossing demonstrates that the way that they ensure compliance with treaty verification requirements is through pressure. That was an explicit warning. What I see crossing said is a way that you should think about the rest of the internal links to this offense. One is North Korea. It's the most proximate. I'll explain the thesis of the argument below, but it causes North Korea to build more nuclear weapons to ensure their survival because of the strategy of deviance, which caused mass extinction events because North Korea is already proliferating. We'll concede that a small bomb would kill anybody, which means that there's a time frame that always any other offense that they have, and means that it's the most important terminal impact in this debate. 2, in terms of Middle East advantage, they say the norms are universal. That would include happening there, like places like Iran, Saudi Arabia, etc., which means that norms backfire there to encouraging Iranian Saudi proliferation, which stokes their Middle East scenario, takes their residual odds that they have on that page because it means that it's more proximate to the affirmative because they've the card because that deviance norm is applied. There are 3 treaties where large conceded to Twin Carson evidence. This is important. It says that it causes defections en masse because any leadership within the treaty particularly causes other nations to defect because they hide their shit. If North Korea continues to proliferate or Iran does what they do in the world of the plan, then it demonstrates the ineffectiveness of the order, which means that it results in other nations defecting. It makes an argument that transparency under those norms results in less actual compliance, or results in deviation because people realize that the cost of breaking the treaty is not that large because other nations are doing the status quo. If you don't believe that argument is true, the 1R conceded a significant amount of things. It is the way that you should interpret the 2R because I can't give a 3R, which means that it causes sandbagging, but it's a strategic incentive for why we went for it. There's too much being dropped. It's a 1R that you should set a high threshold for. First is that it finds these. I'll explain here. The term evidence is very good in saying that the way that psychological and political wars operate means that it is incredibly costly for political capital for rogue nations like North Korea and Iran to comply with the efforts of the United States compliance regime, which means that there's only the ability for them to sort of react to that negatively in order to ensure the survival of their nation. The term evidence is very explicit about the psychological wars that in this indicates and says that it would result in political capital getting too high, so they just proliferate more. They violate norms more because it helps them gain benefits within the interiority of their base. They have no evidence that explains why it is that nations would want to comply with the treaty. We have evidence that says that there's an explicit reason that if it gets enforced, they want to defy it, which means that we have a more proximate internally to any of their internal links, which solves that. Second is unsustainability. This is the Mishra evidence. In fact, it might conceded means that there's no terminal impact to compliance with the treaty anyways, because the U.S. world orders and terminal decline. The Mishra evidence cites the NPT and other nuclear proliferation treaties at the top, which I forgot to highlight, but the bottom of it says the United States is in terminal decline because it says do as I say, not as I do. That doesn't just happen for nuclear proliferation in the CBTT context, but it happens for a variety of others, which wrecks the effectiveness of U.S. for norm proliferation, which means that other nations are never going to listen to the United States anyway. So there's only a question of whether the plan quickens the rate of proliferation. The first argument how the affirmative is good and to safeguard the evidence here. You should read it after the round because it does not actually result in compliance by other nations. The defiance thesis I did above explicitly enters this as Matana evidence, which also does concede it says that nations like being the deviant because it provides them more incentive to proliferate. The Underco evidence says that the United need a hegemon in order to effectively do that. The affirmative results in that hegemon. They don't result in safeguards. The other argument that is made here is about verification. The Carson evidence response here because it says that nations are not likely to actually demonstrate the sort of verification facility. Even the CBTT looks good on paper, other nations can defy those norms secretly and then kind of get the bottomed out by it. The next argument is that ratification results in other countries solving. Read the bottom of this card. The only terminal impact they have is about compliance. We have impact on compliance. So thanks for the extra link. The next argument how there was no cyber, not our link argument. Our argument is just about the norms of nuclear proliferation. The next argument they made is that they solve nukes and loose nuclear weapons. We have impact on this, of course. That was all about. They say the plan results in verification checks. I answered that about there's an incredibly high risk of those. There's an incredibly high threshold for them to achieve those things because they also can't attribute to other nations and force them to sign the treaty. Nations are less likely to do it in the world of the affirmative, which means that verification never actually happens. Go to the I know we fairly thought to kick out of the gist that, oops, so it's not where you're hanging your hat on. There's a few reasons they can't go to the straight turn argument. One is that their evidence ever since the plan boosts PC. PC is not a two-way street. They needed winners when Carter make the argument they did. Rather, Biden has limited floor time and energy making its possible plans popular means that just inhibit infrastructure passage, but not that increases it. Calling something a turn to the tax not sufficient demonstration that the plan causes passive infrastructure too. They didn't concede that the other defensive arguments in the two-way seat. Nicholas did not explicitly kick out something is sufficient for them to cherry pick arguments to one argument, then not explicitly kicking out of other defense last video 2002 and I'll concede a few things. A is that the plan also means that even if they pass infrastructure will happen anyway. There's no dissent to a month's delay. B won't pass for reasons outside of PC. Disagreement over bill and reconciliation. 3 our office still outweighs on time. That was all above. Go to the counter plan. I'll concede the functional permutations to test a competition. I'm not going for it. Go back to the second advantage. They've conceded that Russia war does not cause extinction. Nicholas did this in the middle of the counter plan, which is a little bit messy, but it was still an argument that needed to answer, which means that you don't get no terminal impact to that treaty stuff because there's no ability for Russia to actually escalate into a nuclear war. Even though I've linked from the rest of that treaty ratification process, which takes out their internally taxing any of that other offense. There's no war with Russia. Go to the first advantage. There's no risk of nuclear terror. There are other arguments about capabilities and access, but the Mueller evidence is assumptive of all this and says that those things don't really happen. Even where they post it, that's wrong because Mueller evidence is more contextual. It says that there's a bunch of different resources that exist and multiple checks along the way for stop nations from proliferating. All their evidence has the capabilities that existed in the past for nations to acquire nuclear weapons, but the Mueller evidence says that given that it makes sense that no proliferation happened because there were some norms that exist in the first place to prevent those things, which means that nuclear terror is less likely and the nuclear terror isn't that likely. The last argument is that there's no Middle Eastern war. There are arguments that proliferation destabilizes things, but this doesn't assume the fact that there are greater powers. They've conceded that particular war, which answers that. So there's no terminal impact to that. Also, no Indo-Pak war. They conceded that it's a hype, so they can't go for that either.
327 start prep.
Chad, you need a card doc.
Yes, please.
Fantastic. The order is going to be the disad, advantage 1, and then advantage 2. Is anyone not ready? Great.
The entire 2-R was newbies. The 1-R failed to kick out of the disad. All of it should be evaluated as newbies. You can't extend arguments when you don't extend them in between one speech. They say warming definitely outweighs it, causes species loss, ecosystem collapse, and it's their impact. So it's the only certain impact in this round. We'll have defense for their impact. There's no defense for our speech. You shouldn't evaluate new arguments. It's like evaluating a 1-R argument when it wasn't extended into the 2-R. You shouldn't do it because it wrecks debate. This is a rebuttal, not a constructive. A couple of answers I'll answer anyway, but time frame, their only argument for why their impact outweighs was time frame, but we solved time frame better. It was a new warrant, so just as a new response, you should evaluate time frame in regards to when a tipping point is reached, which means that warming outweighs because now is our last chance to solve. Proliferation takes tons of time to happen and tons of time for nukes to be used in the first place, but time frame for warming is now specifically. That's their impact evidence, which says makes ag non-verifiable, causes huge sea level rise, and makes the Earth uninhabitable. There's a couple answers. They say EFSA's plan boost PC first. That's a sufficient link because it means that it creates bipartisanship. They drop the premise of winners win, which means that more passing a good policy justifies makes it faster and easier to pass other policies proven by the stimulus of the specific warrant that they dropped as in their argument. And they've dropped the plan is popular because it has huge congressional support, but uniqueness frames this. Even if there's a 1% risk of a link, you should give it to us because it's a drop impact, but they've dropped it. It won't pass now because of tons of other things that which won't pass now because of a lack of PC, and so our floor time link wasn't extended, so you shouldn't give it to them. But we solve by making it faster. They say concede defensive, but it isn't. We're not cherry picking. We're only extending the straight turn in the 1-R, which wasn't new. They say always on time for that was the answer about. They say concede plan solves warring. Yes, that's an independent reason why we solve for warring, which is the biggest impacting round. For probability, it's certain that warming causes change because it's dropped, and there's tons of internal link chains for their scenario, which requires engagement and diplomacy can solve for them, but you can't negotiate with carbon. Advantage 1. Hey, quickly, go to the counterplan, please. Counterplan quickly. They have again failed to make an argument. Don't judge the counterplan. A, they didn't say it. B, excuse my 2-R because I have to answer 2 2-Rs. That means that the counterplan solves advantage 2, but doesn't solve the disad straight. It means you vote after or offense outweighing. Don't do the work for him. This is a break round of the TOC. They made a rookie mistake. No judge kick because they didn't say it. And excuse my 2-AR. It doesn't solve the disad because they dropped it. It's a net benefit, which means the straight turn can't be solved, which is a disad to their model. Advantage 1. I don't have to win much here because infrastructure is what we're going for, but it's a reason why we solve for their offense, because we solve for, we create safeguards that solve for proliferation in the first place. Mueller is about the status quo, but doesn't assume that there's nukes RS in North Korea and a black market that hasn't been destroyed, which only the plan can solve for through nuclear forensics, through attribution and data, which they've dropped is key. Nuclear forensics, first, nuclear forensics isn't a process, it's a process not event, which solves for capability issues. It's iterative, which solves their offense. They say a bunch of different reasons. First, they haven't warranted that. Second, the plan solves all of them because it's about the slow, but it's about prior evidence. But we can solve for it because nuke terror turns our offense, because whenever nuclear terrorists engage in terrorist actions, other countries will have to respond. If terrorists nuke North Korea, they will have to respond, which turns their impact. But I'll answer their impact on advantage 2. Advantage 2. This is an excellent impact turn to the status quo. Thanks for giving it us, but it's try or die for the affirmative. They've agreed that countries will cheat and won't like the NPT now, which is the SQO. None of their evidence is about nuclear forensics, which is the threshold of their like Korea is nukes RS already. There's already a black market right now, and countries are already going to proliferate this. So it's try or die to solve. There's no reason why stopping norms will solve. When norms are happening, those bad interventions and bad norms are happening in the status quo. There's only a risk the plan can solve for them by creating the regime that is verification. Verification is what the link turn that I'm going for. All their evidence in the context of countries cheating now because they can't be quote attributed. That is the verification link turn. We can determine who defects and solves to a pressure argument because they will be pressured, which means other countries wouldn't be able to cheat. Glazer is specific about North Korea and says that without nuclear forensics, they will cheat, which is the uniqueness argument. But with nuclear forensics, they won't cheat. More funding for nuclear forensics science also solves because it creates safeguards. It means that other countries will be willing to do so. They've dropped that other countries get on board with nuclear forensics, which means that they do solve for our scenario. They will get on board with nuclear forensics because it themselves too from nuclear weapons independently. They say it's on sustainability. First, that's about the status quo. They don't have a term terminal impact besides our external impacts. We solve for things like Russia, Iran, and Saudi Arabia because good norms can be proliferated through the plan, which solves for bad proliferation. If there isn't proliferation in the first place, then they wouldn't be able to gain nuclear weapons. How can they gain nuclear weapons? We stop them from getting to them in the first place. The nuclear forensic safeguarding them. Yes, nuke terror. They've dropped our advanced one. Yes, nuke terror. They dropped Epic 20. The terrorists have both the capabilities. Mishev, that means just try or die for the after order is collapsing now. It's only a risk that we solve for Western world and making it effective to nuclear forensics attribution and verification. The word nuclear forensics was not in the 2NR. Obviously, this is not a disad or internal link term.
Good debate, y'all.
Good debate.
I assume yes, AF card back as well, Tyler. Cool.
I sent that, by the way.
Just give me like 2 more minutes and the F card doc should be sent. All right, F card deck is set.
We have North Broward. All right, cool. So this was a really awesome debate by both teams, and it was a privilege to judge. Congratulations to making it to this point in the season and for making the most out of a really difficult year. You all should be incredibly proud for getting to this point, at the TOC. I ended up voting affirmative. The crux of my decision is that while the 2NR is out debating the 2AR on many issues, there's never a reason advanced by the negative for why North Korea, Saudi Arabia, and Iran won't develop nuclear weapons now. In other words, while the 2NR was very good on debating out the specific warrants for why rogue states won't comply with the arms control regime and might backlash to increase norm enforcement, that's all fundamentally defensive without a reason the lack of an enforceable global arms control regime would solve proliferation. Admittedly, the AF identifies this flaw in the neg strategy rather late in the debate, but I can simultaneously agree that enforcing arms control makes North Korea less likely to denuclearize, while also agreeing that denuclearization will not happen now. So while the 2NR on the turn is quite effective at undercutting the risk the AF solves anything on advantage to, particularly since there's not really an answer from the AF on like these unsustainability warrants, et cetera, there's no corresponding uniqueness argument to transform that into offense for the negative, which ultimately means the risk of nuclear terrorism outweighs, and it also means that it's try or die to resuscitate the global arms control regime since there's only a risk it fails now. That's the crux of my decision. I have a lot more written about how I came down on the specifics of the debate, but I'll stop here if there are any questions or you just want me to stop the decision here.
My primary question was about your uniqueness sort of argument. What in the 2NR, or so I guess like it's true that there like isn't really good uniqueness scenario for Inoko won't proliferate now. Do you think there is an option through which we can still win the turn that the AF accelerates that proliferation? My sort of argument or the intention for like writing the file and the argument in the 2NR was more of like the pessimistic take that's just like, there is no world in which we can ensure effective compliance with treaties, but there's only a risk that increased norm enforcement and transparency quickens the rate at which proliferation happens, which like increases the risk of instability. Do you think that that path would have been good? And if not, what would you recommend?
Couple things there. Number one, I think that would have been better just because here it's like difficult to capture an external source of offense at all. I think it is still difficult because you would then need an impact as to why accelerated proliferation is bad. And this is difficult because basically all of the terminal impact evidence you're relying upon for this turn comes from the AF. And obviously, like none of that evidence is going to be specific to proliferation now being specifically worse than proliferation in the future. So if you kind of want to make that accelerated proliferation cause instability argument, I think you need to introduce some terminal impact evidence of your own, indicating why accelerated proliferation would be uniquely more destabilizing than just generic North Korean proliferation.
Okay, that makes sense. I guess my other question related to that is there a way to perhaps generate uniqueness for this turn, perhaps via a uniqueness counter plan or through I don't know, kind of like an advantage counter, like sort of, is there a way to generate uniqueness in a way that you would find effective?
Uniqueness counterplan is kind of difficult. I think the biggest problem is just the cards being read are not really about, they're not about North Korea. And more specifically, they're not really about arms control at all. Like the 1NC Termin evidence is about like social identity theory and international pressure being received negatively. The 2NC Carnegie evidence is about transparent monitoring, but it's not really about arms control or the specific countries identified by the AF. So if you want to establish uniqueness for an impact scenario, one, it might be better to externalize from North Korea. So maybe read an impact to a different country proliferating, being stoked specifically by the arms control regime or being stoked by the arms control regime. Or alternatively, you can make a similar version of the accelerated proliferation argument you were mentioning, and like behavior is restrained now. Like North Korea might have nuclear weapons, but it has no incentive to lash out with those nuclear weapons, behave hostile or belligerently to the international community, unless it perceives the international community basically bullying them into compliance. I think you could set up either of those arguments potentially. I think it's just very difficult with the evidentiary set being advanced in this debate.
Okay, my last question was, and after this, I'm just going to pop off because I'm a little tired. But Did you think that 2NR was the right choice in terms of like argument selection?
Yeah, I'd say it was the right choice. I think, there is a case to be made for T Title 18. Like, I know it's not normally the highest quality of T violations, but the potential 2NR there is just, given relatively mediocre evidence being read on both sides, what is the most debatable vision of the topic? There's not really a strong refutation in the 1AR. It's just some of like limits outweigh its try or die for limits claims. And so predictability becomes a secondary question to debatability. But I don't think that was necessarily a better 2NR decision than the one you made here, just because that's like it's a typical T violation to go for, especially against a new AF, and given some of the AF evidence that's being read on the specifics of the forensics debate. And I think it was definitely better than the delegation counterplan.
Okay, excellent. I will probably have further questions, and with that, I'll email you. But thank you, Ms. Broward. Thank you, Tyler.
Thanks for a great debate, Nusher. Thanks, Tyler, for judging.
Thank you.
Yeah.